So, my dear friends from your Tripura, Silchar Medical College, Manipur, Dibrugarh, Guwahati and Tezpur, Jorhat. So, welcome again for this today's class. Today we will be discussing something about the cervical spine injury. Cervical spine is one of the very important topic and is being seen day to day orthopedic clinic. Since most of the cases are coming nowadays with orthopedic accidents, and there is also increasing number of cervical spine injuries are coming. That is true. So as usual, we have to start with some philosophy again. In last class, we had discussed about Bohunnimi Taktinani Donvajada Sajjana Tanhavera Sarvani Nattang Barang Parang Tabah. Last. Today is Ajut P. Santaryatma Bhutanami Sarapisan Prakitik Samithistaya Samamanhaya. So Lord says that though there is born and reborn, but my dental body is not deteriorating. So it is coming millennium after millennium. This is how the body, the Lord is explaining to Arjuna while he was asking how could able to he give knowledge and conscience to Srijadavata. So that is today's philosophy. That is the 4th chapter of Gita. As I said, Gita is not a religious book, it's a book of your philosophy. Anyway, we'll talk about the cervical spine. Let us talk something practical thing. So from the clinical point of view, how it is important, how you are supposed to approach a case of your cervical spine injury. As well as you all know that any case of road traffic accident who is coming to the casualty or orthopedic clinic always do consider is a case of your cervical spine injury. Yes or no? That is why according to the guideline of ATLS, while we approach these cases according to ATLS guideline, we necessarily apply cervical collar. Yes or no? A rigid cervical collar, thinking that there is every possibility of injury to the cervical spine. And we want to prevent any undue movement of the cervical spine, because you know, once there is a damage to the cervical spinal cord, the damage is irreversible. And it is seen because of mistransportation or undue movement of the cervical spine that also increases the number of morbidity and more deterioration of the neurological status. This is a true fact. This is a truth. That is why we do give emphasis always to avoid any undue movement of the injured side. Okay, fine. We have applied the cervical collar in a trauma site. Let us talk about the practical scenario, how we will go, and that will then step by step we will manage the patient, and also we will proceed how exactly we are supposed to approach. That is how we are going to talk today. A real clinical situation. Okay, fine. The patient is coming to you with a case of road traffic accident, is being in casualty. We have applied the cervical collar. Okay, fine. Patient is stable now. His parameters are coming, okay, stable. He is conscious now. Okay, fine. What next? What will you do with the cervical collar? You will continue the cervical collar, or you will remove the cervical collar, or you need to go for some investigations to confirm your diagnosis, because whatever it might be, it is done thinking it to be your cervical spine injury, but not yet confirmed. Yes or no? That is the situation. Yes. Now what next? There are two types of things may happen to you at this moment. One may have some sort of injury, may have injury in the cervical spine. Another category of patients who does not have injury to the cervical spine. So that means one category of patients does not need to undergo investigation. Yes or no? Another category of patient who need to undergo investigations means mostly we go talk about the X-rays and this various your CT scan or MRI, whatever it might be, to confirm your diagnosis. That is a picture. Now, in these situations, that means one can exclude a certain category of patients to avoid, not to undergo any investigations. Now, who are the category and how to differentiate? This is called exclusions of the cervical spine injury. This is called exclusion criteria. And this exclusion of this criteria is important because you did not need to undertake these patients for unnecessary investigation. So there is no point to doing investigations to a category of patients who actually not having. So clinically one can exclude that group. This exclusion criteria is the criteria by which you can differentiate. Now what are these points? A few points are there that you have to remember, and that is also practically important. That if the patient is conscious, well oriented, not under any influence of intoxications, if he can able to do free range of movement of the neck, there is no posterior tenderness, there is no whatsoever neurological deficits, local or focal, anything. Yes, this group of patients need not have to undergo investigation. Did not need to undergo investigation. So you have to remember that is also practically important, that these patients unnecessarily do not go for any investigations. The points are free range of movement, well oriented, conscious, no tenderness, no neurological deficits, nothing. You exclude that group. Now next group is the group where you need to go for investigation. And you need to, of course, analyze this patient, analyze from the neurological point of view also. There are two things are coming up now. One, the analysis of these patients from the neurological point of view, because you know cervical spine injury may have also associated neurological deficit. Yes or no? So you must actually do two things. One, the analysis of these persons from neurological point of view, one. Number two, also to find out radiologically what type of injury he is having in the cervical spine. There are two things are there. Now, let us talk some clinical point here. In this juncture, you have to examine the patients from the neurological point of view. In the neurological point of view, two, three things may happen. One category of patients may have neurological deficit. Yes. One category of patients do not have neurological deficit. In the neurological deficit group, there are again two types. One is complete transaction of the cord. Yes. Another group is there is partial injury to neurological deficit. So again, see, in the cervical spine, there are two things may happen. One group is having some sort of injury in the cervical spine, tenderness is there, may have some sort of fractures in the X-ray, but he is not neurological deficit patient whatsoever. No general, nothing. No neurological, no focal. No sensory, no motor, no focal, no regional or generalized. One group. One group, another, the persons who is having neurological deficits may have again two types. One is having a complete transaction of the cord. Possible. Yes, patients may come to you. That is also applicable not for the cervical spine. It is also applicable for the other groups as well. Subsequent down below. The cord may undergo complete transaction. One group. Another group may have some sort of partial injury to the cord. We will talk about that also. Yes, two groups. Yes. On the other hand, both this group, what I said, without neurological deficits actually may come to you in the clinical practice as a spinal shock. Spinal shock. This part should be clear to your mind, that everybody, whatsoever, with or without any sort of injury in the cervical spine, actually, he may come to you in a physiological state. That is a physiological, pathophysiology is there, that there is complete suspension of the activity of the spinal cord is known as spinal shock. Complete exercise of the known as spinal shock. Now how do you determine this person is having spinal shock? The spinal shock is defined as the complete suspension of the activities of the spinal cord. No reflex, no sensory, no motor, everything suspended. And this patient cannot be evaluated to know actual neurological deficit because he is in shock. So even you do the investigation the test also, this picture which is coming up now is complete suspension. So this is not the real picture of the neurological deficit. Because in spinal shock, patients may not have any sort of injury to the cord actually. Now that means you have to wait till the persons get over from the spinal shock. Now how to know that this person is getting over from the spinal shock? It usually takes 24 hours, sometimes it is more than that. Commonly, most of the time it is 24 hours, sometimes it is more than that. It's in months also, sometimes. But this group of patients, while he come over, that means his spinal shock is over, is known by the presence of emerging of what? Primitive reflexes. Yes or no? Primitive reflexes. So these things are important. They do supposed to look for the stimulus the clitoris or the stimulus the trigon, look for the constrictions of the anus. Yes? These are called primitive reflexes. These primitive reflexes, appearance of these primitive reflexes are the hallmark to say is cessation of the spinal shock. Now this patient should be evaluated now for the neurological deficit. Yes, sir? So that means now he is a candidate where actually you are supposed to do the neurological examination. As you all know, that is gone are the days when you express the quadriplegia, paraplegia, tetraplegia like this. Nowadays, the way of expressing this is by the quantification of the neurological deficit with the help of the criteria called ASIA grade. ASIA, you know ASIA grading? So ASIA grading is the nowadays way of expressing the actual neurological deficit, whether A, B, C, D, E. Yes, sir? A, B, C, D, E, where we used to see the sensory at the mid-clavicular region and go down below, and the motor upper 5, lower 5. So these things to be clear. Again I am emphasizing this point that today this neurological deficit group is being quantified with the help of ASIA grading. This ASIA grading analysis is basically done by analysis of the sensory and analysis of the motor. In the upper limb, we used to see 5 motor groups: flexion, extension, extension of the knee, abduction, and see. Lower limb also you do the 5 groups of major fine. So upper limb 5, flexion, extension, elbow extension, wrist extension, then gripping and abduction. So upper limb. Likewise, lower limb also hip flexion, knee extension, ankle extension, then dorsiflexion. So and knee flexion. So these things are being done to evaluate the motor part. On the other hand, sensory part is being done at the level of mid-clavicular region and down below, and look all these sensories there, particularly pinprick and phantus. So thereby you evaluate, and that should to be added numerical digit. Like a motor, you know all these 0 to 5, yes or no? And again sensory also positive, negative or indeterminate. That way you have to calculate, and that is the way to analyze this neurological deficiency. And ultimately, while you club together, that will become as A, B, C, D, E. So A is complete, no sensory, no motor. Yes. B is your sensory positive, no motor. C is a motor positive 0/3, sensory positive. 4 is a more than 4, 3 plus sensory positive. And finally E is your complete, normal. So that is your getting or SI gettings A, B, C, D, E. That is for the neurological examinations clinically. That is for the neurological examinations clinically being done, and then you have to calculate it to find in which group it falls. ठीक है सर? That A, B, C, D is done. That is for neurological. And on the other hand, in case of cervical spine also, there are few ways of expressing the neurological deficit. These are known as syndromes. As I said, the cord may injure completely, one. Number two, the cord may have partial damage to the cord. In the complete transactions, that means no neurological, no sensory, nothing down below. That is one. On the other hand, if the partial injury is there, probably which part of the cord is involved. Depending upon which, we have certain syndromes there. You know that the central cord syndrome, the anterior cord syndrome, the posterior cord syndrome, the bouncy cord syndrome, all these syndromes are related to it. That all these syndromes actually indicates partial injury to the cord. This part should be clear. If it is happening to the anterior part of this cord, it is anterior cord syndrome. So you know what are the things there in the anterior part. Corticospinal tract, yes. Then a bouncy cord syndrome, half part is transaction, half is injured. You know the decussation of the fibers taking place. That is why something is missing same side, something is missing other side. That you have to evaluate. Got my point? Spinothalamic tramic, how is going? That is bouncy cord. Then posterior cord, a gall and buttock tract is involved. That is why that part is your lost. On the other hand, most commonly in the cervical spine, in elderly patient, we do get is called your central cord syndrome. Central cord syndrome. And this central cord syndrome is very quite common in case of your elderly cervical spine injury. While you take up this subject proper in cervical spine, you will find there are two bimodal injuries. One is the young generation, another is your elderly patient. Young generations are mostly coming with high velocity trauma. On the other hand, the elders are mostly coming from the low velocity trauma, trivial fall because of unsteadiness, coordination is lost, fall that leads to a hyperextension of the injury most of the time. And these people are often coming with your more weakness in the upper limb than that of your lower limb. More weakness in the upper limb than that of your lower limb is a hallmark of the signs of the central cord syndrome, and particularly in case of elderly patients with osteophyte and other things. Yes, sir? Because I said that the cervical spine injury are in two groups. One is young with high velocity trauma, elderly with low velocity trauma, a fall, and because of the presence of your osteophyte and other things, that leads to your injury to the cord. Yes or no? So that is another thing happening. So here you will find that group of patients are having central cord syndrome. There is tremendous weakness, profound weakness and other points in the upper limb than compared to the lower limb. Okay? This part you have to understand that what are things. Then you are supposed to understand to know, you have to do the sensory test and the motor test as well. Now this is your clinical part, okay. Now next point is then what are the X-rays supposed to do. Now next point is the investigation. What we have discussed so far is the clinical things, yes or no? What is your approach there? What is your your exclusion criteria, that is important, because you may not need to go for all the patients for investigation. You have to exclude those persons. And then also those persons you need to do investigation, clinical examinations to find out the neurological deficiency, which category it falls, yes or no. Then finally you need to do certain investigations to confirm the X-rays. Now what are the X-rays supposed to do in case of trauma situation in cervical spine? We'll talk. Now, as you know, one X-ray is not enough to tell us everything. And you know, in the cervical spine, particularly junctional area, the craniocervical junction means C0, means occiput, C1 and C2. This area is your craniocervical junction. This craniocervical junction and these cervicothoracic junctions, these junctions are not very easy to see in the normal X-rays. Yes, there you have to take some special X-ray also. On the other hand, the rest of the part, C2, this is called subaxial cervical spine injury. Now, in the cervical spine, you have two parts actually, so to say. One is called craniocervical injury, which comprises your C0, C1 and C2. Another group is your subaxial cervical spine. Subaxial cervical spine comprises with this normal vertebrae, your typical vertebrae of C3 to C7. Yes, so this is basically two. And in this segment, as I told you, that sometimes you need to take special X-rays to understand this thing. Now, what are the X-rays you are supposed to do and how is going to help us? The most important X-rays in the cervical spine is the lateral view of the cervical spine. That is most important thing. But as such, to complete the list, let us complete the list. What are the X-rays supposed to do in the cervical spine? One is standard AP view. Another is lateral view. Another is your right oblique view. Another is your left oblique view. Another is your mouth open view to see the C1, C2 junction. Then it is, as I said, the most of the time you cannot see the cervicothoracic junction. There you need to take the swimmer's view like this to see the, because many times the soldiers obliterate this lateral view. So many things are there. And some surgeons, they also say that one can go for stress view also to see the stability of the cervical spine, which is not advocated nowadays because of the fact that he may deteriorate neurologically by doing undue movement of the head. That is a controversial matter. Even then, the standard views are AP view for C1, C2 junctional area, mouth open view, AB view of the cervical spine, lateral view of the cervical spine, oblique views are also important to see. Then swimmer's view for the junction area, particularly cervical. But in a trauma situation, sometimes all the X-rays are not possible. One point, patient is non-cooperative and the way he is supposed to do may not be very convenient sometimes to get the X-ray. So sometimes the people used to go for the cervical spine CT scan. CT scan to evaluate it much better. But as such, in trauma situations, this is the standard X-ray you are supposed to do. So you know what are the X-rays in cervical spine? AP. Out of all the X-rays, the most important, supposing a question may come to you like that, the radiographer is telling me that, sir, in the emergency, I have exhausted all the X-rays. Only one is left with me. Now patient can have only one view. Now, which view is supposed to suggest? In this case, you will suggest lateral view of the cervical spine. Are you getting my point? In the emergency situations, she said that there is no more X-ray film available, only one film is there. Then you suggest only the lateral view of the cervical spine rather than the other views. Other views are also important, but lateral views gives more information to you. Now the analysis of the cervical spine, the X-ray will do step by step. the how to read a cervical spine X-ray, what are the important points there. Nowadays, the concept of your injury, injury and subsequent management of the injuries are nowadays being categorized with some scoring system, where you incorporate the morphology of the spine, injury of the spine. Yes, you incorporate the PLC, that is your posterior ligamental complex, and also incorporate the neurological status also. These things are nowadays emerging to demarcate the persons who need to undergo conservative treatment and one group where you need to take up the patient for operative treatment. So this will help us. These matters are a bit controversial sometimes, as many times it is very difficult to come to conclusions which is going to give what best. So that is why we have to categorize according to the help, conglomerating or considering all the important points, give score to it, then find out where he fits, whether he is fit for conservative or whether he fits for operative treatment. It is called SLIC nowadays, called subaxial cervical spine scoring, SLIC classification. This is also emerging for the thoracolumbar spine area also, to categorize these two groups, one for conservative, another is for operative treatment. That is for the treatment point of view. But as such, for the X-ray, we'll talk about the X-ray, how to study the X-ray, one point, and as I told you earlier, that while reading the cervical spine also, we supposed to have some analysis, that how is A, B, C, D. What is A means alignment, B means bone, C means cartilage, and also D means your degeneration, something like that. So this is the way you supposed to do the analysis of the X-ray. So we'll talk about the X-ray. These are the only basic things we have discussed today. So we'll take up these X-ray in subsequent class. Till now, is there anything to be asked or any point to be clarified? Okay, Bon.